A carbon atom in a CO2 molecule in the atmosphere is absorbed by grass and used along with water and energy from the sun in a process called photosynthesis. The purpose of photosynthesis is to make glucose for the plant. The plant will use glucose to make ATP for the mitochondria of the cell. Photosynthesis itself takes place in the chloroplast in the leaf. This process takes CO2, water absorbed from the ground, and energy from sunlight into glucose. Oxygen is a byproduct of photosynthesis. Our carbon atom is right now in a molecule of glucose, for it is turned into ATP. Isn't it amazing that the energy from the sun is all contained in a single molecule? But our carbon molecule never gets turned into ATP. The grass is turned into silage, which is food for a cow. The glucose in the silage is then consumed by the cow. Normally, the glucose in the grass would be absorbed into the cow's bloodstream and be used to make ATP. But our glucose molecule is special. Our glucose molecule gets turned into lactose in milk through special mammary glands in the cow's udder. Our carbon atom in the lactose molecule is then milked out to make cheese. To make cheese, the milk is heated to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This is done so that the enzyme called rennet can make cheese faster. Citric acid is also added to the milk to speed up the process. Why do we heat the milk and add citric acid? Because rennet's optimal temperature is around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and it works the best under an acidic environment. Anyways, back to the cheese. Rennet is added to the hot, acidic milk. Rennet is actually a collection of enzymes. The main enzyme is rennet is chymosin. Its function is to break down a protein called casein. When the casein is broken down, it attracts to the other broken piece of casein. These pieces attract and coagulate together. The curds are then left undisturbed for a while to let the casein fully bond together and to give them the chymosin and other proteins time to work. What's left after this process are curds and whey. Whey is that liquidy substance left over after the milk coagulates. The curds are the stuff that will soon be cheese. What we do next is cut the curds. We basically run a knife through the curds over and over again. What this does is give the casein room to expand. Also releases some of the whey still trapped in the curds. Finally, we heat the curds and knead them. What this does is it releases more whey, increases the density of the cheese, and finally our little carbon molecule ends up in a piece of cheese. And after all these steps, the cheese is consumed by a human. The cheese first goes into the mouth, where it binds with an enzyme called amylase. This enzyme in the saliva breaks down the cheese so that the stomach doesn't have to do too much work. After this, the cheese or the bolus goes down the esophagus into the stomach. The amylase works all the way down up to the stomach, but the acidic environment prevents amylase from working in the stomach. In the stomach, another enzyme called pepsin breaks down the proteins in cheese. After the cheese is broken down into the stomach, it goes into the small intestine. The small intestine has a huge amount of surface area, so that the most nutrients can be absorbed into the bloodstream. There are many enzymes released in the small intestine, such as amylase, lactase, sucrase, and many others. The lactase is the enzyme that breaks down our lactose molecule into glucose, which is absorbed into the bloodstream through diffusion. The bloodstream carries the glucose molecule to a muscle cell, which absorbs it along with oxygen. These all go into the mitochondria of the cell, where the glucose oxygen is turned into CO2, water, and ATP. The ATP is used to expand the muscle cell in the wrist to move the wrist back to hit a forehand while playing tennis. The water is urinated out, and our carbon molecule, which used to be in the glucose, is now a molecule of CO2 all over again. This CO2 molecule is delivered through the bloodstream to the lungs, where it diffuses into an alveolus. The diaphragm pushes up on the lungs, forcing the CO2 molecule through the bronchioles, through the bronchi, and through the esophagus out into the atmosphere.